Some stories don't have an ending, they just stop. The trail goes cold, the bad guys get away. And all you're left with is a question mark. The Glico-Morinaga case is one of those stories. It's about a mysterious group that called itself the Monster with 21 Faces. For 17 months, they terrorized Japan. They kidnapped a CEO, poisoned candy, and taunted the police with letters. And then they just disappeared. Nobody ever found out who they were. It all started on a quiet evening in March 1984. The target was Katsuhisa Ezaki. He was the president of Ezaki Glico, a huge candy and food company in Japan. Glico was famous. They made Pocky, those little chocolate-covered biscuit sticks. Everyone knew Glico. Ezaki was at home with his wife and daughter. They were in their house near Osaka. Suddenly, two men wearing masks broke in. They had guns. They tied up Ezaki's wife and daughter. They found Ezaki in the bathroom. He was taking a bath. The men forced him out, made him get dressed, and took him away. They dragged him to a warehouse. It was a bold move, kidnapping the head of a major corporation from his own home. The country was in shock. This kind of thing didn't happen in Japan. It was supposed to be a safe place. The police launched a massive investigation, but the kidnappers were smart. They left almost no clues. Then came the ransom demand. They wanted 1 billion yen and 100 kilograms of gold bullion. That was a huge amount of money. The police and the Glico company started trying to figure out how to handle it. They prepared for a money drop. But before anything could happen, something unexpected occurred. 3 days after he was taken, Katsuhisa Ezaki escaped. He managed to untie himself and just walked out of the warehouse. He found a phone and called for help. You might think that would be the end of it. The victim was safe. The kidnapping had failed, but it was just the beginning. The group behind the kidnapping wasn't finished with Glico, not by a long shot. About 3 weeks later, the letters started arriving. They sent them to newspapers and to the police. They were theatrical and full of taunts. This is when they gave themselves a name. They called themselves Kaijin Nijuichi Menso, which translates to the monster with 21 faces. The name wasn't random. It came from a famous series of Japanese detective novels by Edogawa Rampo. In the books, the monster with 21 faces was a master of disguise, a clever villain who always outsmarted the hero detective. By choosing this name, the group was sending a message. They were clever, they were playing a game. And they were in control. The first letters were chilling. They claimed they had laced Glico products with potassium cyanide. They said they had put these poison candies on store shelves all over the country. This caused immediate panic. Imagine being a parent in Japan at that time. You see Glico products everywhere. Your kids love them. And now, you hear that some of them might be poisoned. It was terrifying. Stores immediately pulled all Glico products from their shelves. Glico's sales plummeted. The company lost millions of dollars. The stock price crashed. It was economic terrorism. The police were under immense pressure. They had to find these poisoned candies. They had to find the monster. But the monster was playing with them. They sent more letters. They taunted the police for being stupid. They gave clues for fake money drops, sending hundreds of officers on wild goose chases. One time, they told Glico to leave the ransom money in a briefcase on a specific express train. An investigator, disguised as a Glico employee, got on the train with the money. He waited for a signal. The monster's instructions said a white flag would appear by the tracks. He saw the flag, but then he saw he was being watched by another passenger. The officer got suspicious and didn't make the drop. It turned out the other passenger was just an ordinary person. The police had messed up. The monster sent another letter making fun of them for their mistake. The game continued. The monster kept sending letters. The letters were strange. They were written in a unique, almost playful style using Osaka dialect. They were arrogant and witty. They would insult the police, then praise them, then insult them again. One letter said, "To the stupid police, are you idiots? There are so many of you. What are you doing? If you were professionals, you could catch us. Since you are so hopeless, we will give you a hint." But the hints always led nowhere. They seemed to enjoy the attention, the chaos they were creating. They became celebrities of a dark sort. The media followed every twist and turn. The whole country was watching. One of the most famous moments of the case came from a failed money drop. Police were staking out a location. They saw a man who looked suspicious. He was watching the area. A police officer thought he looked like he was part of the gang. Later, the officer helped create a composite sketch of the man. The sketch showed a man with narrow, sharp eyes. The media called him the fox-eyed man. That picture was everywhere. It was on TV, in newspapers, on posters. The fox-eyed man became the public face of the monster with 21 faces. But they never found him. He was a ghost. Was he the leader? Just a random member. Or a complete red herring? No one knows. After a few months of tormenting Glico, the monster did something strange. They sent a letter that said, "We forgive Glico." Just like that, they declared a truce. It seemed the game was over. Glico slowly started putting its products back on shelves. People started to breathe a little easier, but the monster wasn't gone. They were just bored with Glico. They had new targets, they moved on to another company, Morinaga. The pattern was the same. Threatening letters, claims of poisoned products, ransom demands, and more taunting of the police. They arranged another money drop. An investigator was supposed to throw a bag of money off a train when he saw a sign. He saw the sign, he was about to throw the bag, but then he saw that the train was going too fast. He thought it was a trap. He thought maybe the monster wanted him to get hurt or killed. He didn't throw the money. Another failure. The monster sent another letter, mocking him for being a coward. The monster was relentless. They moved from Morinaga to another company, House Food Corporation. Again, the same playbook: letters, threats, demands. By this point, the police were desperate. The public was losing faith in them. They were being outsmarted at every turn by an enemy they couldn't see. The pressure was building, especially on the leaders of the investigation. During the House Foods extortion attempt, the police almost got that. They had a plan. They had House Foods agree to a money drop. The drop was supposed to happen in a parking area off a highway. The police had the place surrounded with over 100 officers, many of them undercover. They were waiting, they were sure they would catch them this time, but the monster never showed up. They sent a letter later saying they knew it was a trap. They had been watching the police get into position. It was another humiliating defeat for law enforcement. It was around this time that the police got a lead that led to the fox-eyed man again. They were tailing a car they thought was connected to the group. They followed it to a house. They identified the man who drove the car. They were convinced he was involved. But after intense investigation, they realized he was innocent. He had a solid alibi. The pressure to make an arrest was so intense that the police were starting to see ghosts everywhere. They were chasing shadows. After failing to get money from House Foods, the monster went quiet for a bit. Then, they came back. And this time they went after Morinaga, another giant candy company. Morinaga was Glico's biggest rival, and this time, the monster was not just making threats. They proved they were serious. They sent letters to media outlets. Inside the letters were Morinaga candy boxes. And inside the boxes was a note. It said the candy was laced with sodium cyanide. Your lab tests confirmed it. It was real. Then came the most terrifying part of the whole affair. The monster announced they had placed 20 boxes of poisoned Morinaga candy on store shelves in several cities. Each box was marked with a sticker. The sticker said, in Japanese, "Danger contains toxins. Do not eat." From the monster with 21 faces. A nationwide search began. Police and store clerks frantically checked every shelf. They found several of the poisoned boxes. Thankfully, no one ate any of it. The warning labels worked, but the message was clear. The monster wasn't bluffing. They could kill people if they wanted to. The public was terrified. Morinaga's business was destroyed overnight. People stopped buying all candy just to be safe. The company had to lay off hundreds of workers. The economic damage was enormous. The fear was real and palpable. The monster had brought one of the biggest economies in the world to its knees with just a few letters and some poison. The police were at a breaking point. The investigation had been going on for over a year. They had thousands of officers working the case. They had investigated over 125,000 people. They had followed up on tens of thousands of tips. And they had nothing. They were no closer to knowing who the monster was than they were on day one. The pressure took a terrible toll. The police superintendent in charge of the investigation, a man named Yamamoto, was consumed by the case. He felt the weight of the failure personally. In August 1985, a few days after the statute of limitations on the original Glico kidnapping was set to expire, he couldn't take it anymore. He went into his backyard, doused himself in kerosene, and set himself on fire. He committed suicide. He left a note taking responsibility for the failure to catch the monster. It was a tragic end for a dedicated officer, a symbol of how devastating the case had become. Just a week after Superintendent Yamamoto's death, the monster sent its final letter. The tone was different. It wasn't as playful. It was almost somber. The letter was titled "To Our Fans Throughout Japan." It mentioned the death of the superintendent. It said, "Yamamoto died. What a fool. We've got no grudge against him. He was an honest man." Then, it announced the end of the game. We decided to forget about torturing food-making companies. If anyone blackmails any company, it's not us, but a copycat. And the final, chilling line was, "We are bad guys. That means we've got more to do other than bullying companies. It's fun to lead a bad man's life." The monster with 21 faces. And with that, they were gone. The letters stopped. The threats ended. The poisoning stopped. It was over. The monster with 21 faces just vanished into thin air. The police kept investigating, but the trail was cold. Years went by. The statute of limitations for the other crimes, like the poisonings, eventually ran out. The case was officially closed. unsolved. So who were they? That's the question that has haunted Japan for decades. There are many theories, but no answers. One popular theory is that it was a group of people with inside knowledge of police procedures. They always seemed to be one step ahead. They knew about surveillance plans. They knew how police communicated. This suggests that maybe a former police officer was involved, or someone who had a deep understanding of law enforcement tactics. Another theory is that it was connected to stock market manipulation. The group never successfully collected any ransom money. That's strange. If money was the only goal, they were terrible at it. But every time they targeted a company, that company's stock price would crash. Someone who knew about the attacks in advance could have made a fortune by short-selling the stocks. This theory suggests the ransom demands were just a distraction, a cover for a much more sophisticated financial crime. This would explain why they never seemed to care that much about picking up the money. Their profit was being made elsewhere, on the stock market floor. Some people think the Yakuza, Japan's organized crime syndicates, were involved. The threats and extortion fit their profile, but the style was all wrong. The Yakuza are typically more direct. They don't usually engage in such elaborate theatrical games with the police and the media. The playful, taunting letters don't sound like typical gangsters. There's also the idea that it was a group of left-wing extremists or radicals. During the 1960s and 70s, Japan had many radical groups that would attack corporations, seeing them as symbols of capitalism. The monster's attacks on big companies could be seen through that lens, but again, the style was off. Radical groups usually issue political manifestos and take credit for their actions to promote their cause. The monster never made any political demands. Their motive seemed to be chaos and money, not ideology. And what about the Fox-eyed man? The police did eventually identify a man who they believed was the person in the sketch. He was a known criminal with Yakuza ties, but they could never find enough evidence to charge him with anything related to the Glico-Morinaga case. He always denied any involvement. Was he the man, or was he just another unfortunate person who happened to look like a police sketch? We'll likely never know. The case of the monster with 21 faces left deep scars on Japan. It changed the way companies thought about security. It forced the police to reevaluate their method. It introduced a new level of fear and cynicism into a society that had prided itself on being safe and orderly. It was the first major crime of its kind in the media age in Japan. The monster used the newspapers and television as their stage, and the whole country was their audience. The story has been told and retold many times in books, movies, and TV shows in Japan. It's become a part of modern folklore, a real-life mystery where the villain was smarter than the heroes. The monster was never a person. It was a name, a phantom, a ghost in the machine. A voice that came through letters, full of mockery and threats, that held a nation captive. The identity of the people behind the monster with 21 faces is one of the greatest unsolved crime mysteries of the 20th century. Were they a small group of criminals, a single, brilliant mastermind, disgruntled employees? Stock market crooks? We don't know. All we know is that for 17 months, they ran circles around the entire Japanese police force. They caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. They spread fear and chaos. And they got away with it. Completely. They wrote their own ending. And that ending was to simply walk away, leaving behind a legacy of questions that will probably never be answered. The monster, with 21 faces, won the game.